Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Underground. This is the briefing for Wednesday, the 15th of September, 2021, and it is being recorded on the 14th of September at 1700 Eastern Daylight Time. So let's jump right into it with the weather. Weather over the next 12 hours is not going to be super great for any kind of visual surveillance. There's going to be a lot of high-level turbulence as well as low cloud ceilings. So the lower the cloud ceilings are, the harder it is for visual assets to actually get below those clouds. So for most of the American Southeast, there are going to be those really low cloud levels as well as patchy spots over the West Coast. And cloud cover over the next 18 hours is not going to be that much clearer. It's going to remain pretty good cloud cover for most of the Gulf states as well as the Northeast and off the West Coast as usual this time of year. And moving into NoTAMs, really there are only two of note. The first one there is probably going to expire by the time this video gets out. Biden is spending the day in Denver to talk about climate change and move and shake in that arena. And there's also a SpaceX launch down at Cape Canaveral sometime on the 15th. They're not quite sure due to weather, so there are about a dozen different NoTAMs that are lined up for different slots and different time frames just in case. So as we all know, these space launches tend to have a window of time rather than a specific time. So they've got pretty much the whole day blocked off. Moving into the civil unrest forecast, really we're just kind of waiting to see what a lot of this resistance is going to look like from the medical mandates that the White House has sent down. So just keeping the whole country yellow, just to make sure that we've got all the bases covered. It's better to be overcautious than under at this stage, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. Really, the other one I wanted to call attention to is Washington, D.C. for September 18th. September 18th is the Justice for J6 protest demonstration. Looks like this would be a great time for the federal government to, how should I say, commit some more crimes because they have decided that they need the Capitol fencing back. So the fencing is back up at the U.S. Capitol, as I'll mention here in a minute again. But yeah, that would be a great time for one of those subversive acts. So. But yeah, Washington, D.C. on September 18th is probably going to be the most heavily surveilled city in the entire world. Just like pretty much always, but especially more so on that day. Then moving into logistics. So really the first one to mention is the microchip shortage. So this is not just affecting vehicles, but smartphones as well. However, when it comes to the auto manufacturing specifically, there are lots of affected states. The states that seem like they're getting hit the hardest with their factories getting shut down are Kansas, Missouri, Kentucky, Illinois, Michigan, Tennessee, and Indiana. Those are the states which seem to be like they have the most plants either shut down or the most workers laid off from the chip shortage. Also, there is a paper shortage, or really a global paper shortage, but particularly here in the United States, due to shipping prices from Asia. So we're seeing reports from a lot of individual buyers and sellers in the paper industry saying that shipments from China have tripled just over the past few months alone. So that combined with paper mills that have been cutting production for years due to paperless efforts, we still need paper, right, for a lot of things. So when the supply drops, but the demand stays the same, we have a pretty severe shortage, and that's exactly what's happening. So a lot of book manufacturers and bookstores around the country are putting out the warning to say, hey, if you're looking for a specific book for the holiday season to gift to someone, make sure that you buy it now because they're looking at a 6 to 8 week backlog on the manufacturing of books, so paper books. So something to keep in mind as we move forward into the winter. And also, we're seeing a lot of states declaring a school bus driver shortage. Now, a lot of states are having varying levels of shortages, but most of the states that are hit the hardest are New Jersey, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Texas, Virginia, Florida, and Massachusetts. Massachusetts actually has activated 90 National Guard soldiers to drive school buses. And this number will increase to 250 as needed. But the specific areas in Massachusetts that are going to have National Guard soldiers driving school buses are Chelsea, Lawrence, Lowell, and Lynn. Those four areas have been designated to be driven by National Guard soldiers. Now, on social media, a lot of parents are having some reservations about their children being driven to school by soldiers. At this stage, I personally would completely understand that, even though there's really nothing nefarious about this that we can find here. This frustration from the parents that we're seeing really highlights that even though the overwhelming majority of National Guard deployments are humanitarian in nature, people still haven't forgotten about the whole inauguration scandal. That event succeeded in changing the relationship between American citizens and the military to some degree. In other words, the soldiers deployed to the Capitol for the inauguration, a lot of citizens viewed them as an adversary more than a friend, right? So now the chickens are coming home to roost on that, and it's going to be hard to get that trust back, specifically within the National Guard. Even for states that didn't deploy any troops to the capital for that, it's going to be a burden for a lot of commands to get that community relationship back. So this event just goes to show that the second order effects from the inauguration fiasco are still very much a factor for daily life here in the U.S. And just so that everyone's aware, the soldiers are not really going to be driving school buses. These are the vehicles they're going to be driving. So this I pulled from one of the county's websites. So this is what the vehicles that the troops are going to be driving. As far as I can tell, they're not going to actually be driving the big classic yellow school buses. They're going to be driving these kind of overflow vehicles. So just something to be aware of. I just wanted to put that out there for everyone who might be curious. Moving into critical infrastructure concerns, really, the one event that I wanted to highlight today is kind of a mystery. I don't have a whole lot of information on this. I have not gone down this rabbit hole to investigate fully, but I did want to talk about it because it's just the strangest thing I've seen all week. And this is the story that has come out in a lot of mainstream media referring to the mysterious actions regarding the Department of Defense and Internet IP addresses. So, on Trump's last day in office, 175 million IP addresses that were owned and sort of operated by the Department of Defense were transferred to a private company by the Trump administration on his last day in office. And almost immediately after that, almost immediately after Biden took back over, they were taken back by the DoD. So these 175 million different IPv4 IP addresses, that's about 6% of the entire internet, right? Of all of the addresses on the internet, that's about 6% of them. So I personally don't really know what to make of this just yet. Well, even first of all, why the DoD has that many IP addresses. Just gut instinct says that they probably own that many due to having a lot of space required for the SIPRNet, NIPRNet, and JWICs and things like that, and NSA net and stuff like that. So there's a lot of internet traffic that exists there. I don't know why they need that many IP addresses though, but and why they would make this transfer mysteriously, just kind of quietly, and then transfer it right back. There's also the consideration that maybe these IP addresses are used for things like pen testing or deliberate vulnerabilities to allow hackers from other countries to come in, and then they can exploit weaknesses and things like that. I don't really know. I'm not a cyber nerd, so I'd have to dig into this a lot more and get smart on it for you guys. But I just wanted to point it out as something that anybody out there can research further because it was kind of buried in the sources that I normally check. So there you go on that. So moving into significant governmental actions, the first one here is it looks like we might have been quite correct in our thinking that airline travel might be banned because currently Fauci is going, he's making the rounds on all the media stations talking about how he wants to ban domestic air travel for the unclean, the unjabbed, right? So I guess we'll see how it shakes out, but yeah, I would expect that to come into a full blown plan very soon here. Moving on to number two, there was a declassified document dropped by the FBI. It's only a 16-page document, or 17 pages if you count the classification, that talk about the Saudi involvement in the 9/11 hijackings. So this is something that's interesting. I'm not quite sure why they released it because it looks really bad for the federal regime, and it just gets people all up in arms around the anniversary of September 11th. But you can read the full document. The source will be either below or on the slides that we upload to Odysee. But yeah, it more or less confirms that there was a lot of involvement between officials, Saudi officials here in the United States, and a few of the hijackers. So yeah, it just confirms kind of like what we already knew, that Saudi Arabia was highly involved in the process. Now, I say that I put confirm there in air quotes because this is a government document, and it's sort of like when all those UFO things started coming out a while back. Trust in government is at an all-time low, right? So even you've got the people that have been saying, the government's covering up UFOs for the past 50 years, and then suddenly the government tries to hint that UFOs are real, and those same people are like, I don't trust the government. Like, why are they're lying about UFOs being real? So it's kind of like one of those things. So I don't really know what to believe anymore when it comes to government documents being released. But this one has been released, so I guess it's something to go off of and something for further investigation, I guess. Also, like I mentioned, moving on to the Capitol, the fencing is going back up. I don't know if it's going to be going back up in its full entirety. I have not been able to check out the entire perimeter of the fence, but yeah, I would guess it's probably going to come back in force. We're almost certainly going to see National Guard deployments as well, and this is in preparation again for that uh, um, January 6th protest to free the political prisoners. So we'll see how that goes. My guess is it's probably going to result in a lot of clandestine operations on the part of the federal government. So I guess we'll see though. Moving on to number 4, the IRS is well, they're trying to get a line added to the budget for this year that would allow them to track and document and surveil your purchases of anything over $600. Now, they're trying to lower this limit because previously anything that was any transaction over $10,000 flagged like the terrorism systems and allowed them to conduct surveillance and stuff on you. Well, now they're trying to drop it down to $600. So that's a huge problem. However, I personally am not convinced that the IRS tracking what you spend money on is probably one of the least amounts of your worries when it comes to federal surveillance, because everyone else is tracking is tracking you, or trying to at least. I mean, geez, the freaking mail service has a social media monitoring branch that we discovered a few months ago. So, man, it's just federal surveillance is pervasive as ever. And finally, and most interestingly, I guess, is a new book by Bob Woodward. I know, one of the world's worst sources for pretty much anything, and a confirmed liar. He's written a new book called Peril, and in that book, it's making the rounds in the media, at least conservative media. Uh, in the book, his interviews with different people seem to, in heavy air quotes, confirm that General Milley did in fact conspire to withhold information from President Trump, and he directly ordered his staff and his subordinates to not take any orders from Trump. Yeah, it also alleges that Milley secretly called his Chinese counterpart to conspire against Trump and prevent any kind of military action against China in the event that China decided to do something. So I know talking about it as casually as this seems a little bit cavalier, but I don't want to put too strong of an emphasis on it. I mean, we did a podcast, like the day after or 2 days after the January 6th incident, in which we're calling it like, yeah, this was a coup. Like, this is exactly what had happened. The vice president and chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, confirmed that they withheld information from the commander in chief. So what else is that if not a military coup? So as far as I know, on January 6th, President Trump was still president. He wasn't, the change of power did not occur. The nuclear football was not moved until January 20th. But apparently, according to Bob Woodward's new book, it was. The authorization to launch strategic assets in defense of this country might not have resided with anyone but General Milley post January 6th. So again, this is just some guy's book, some guy that is a confirmed liar. However, the only reason I'm talking about this is because they are promoting it as it was a good thing. Sort of like that Time magazine article that Time Magazine spent the entire like 6 month period after the election talking about how there was no fraud, there was no fraud, there was no fraud, and then they came up with an article that says, yeah, there was fraud. Not only was there fraud, but it was a good thing, and here's how we did it. The whole O.J. Simpson approach to things. So it appears like General Milley might be, if this was an interview with him, I haven't personally read the book yet. I probably won't, honestly, because I hesitate to spend any money on Bob Woodward's work. But yeah, something to keep in mind, something to kind of keep in the back of your mind as we move forward. That yeah, this might have been a lot more illegitimate than we already know it was. So yeah, a lot of significant governmental actions this week. But moving forward into a kind of a new tracker slide. I created this slide and a couple of others here to sort of map out where the resistance is occurring. So this is a simple chart comprised from many sources that talk about mask mandates for children in K through 12 public schools. So this is going to be a kind of a very loose graphic. It's not hard and fast, because if there is a lot of this is district by district. So if there is a mask mandate for any school district in the state, we're coloring the whole state red because it's easier to do it that way. And usually it's highly dependent, again, on each school district, but the states that are red usually have their mandates in their largest school districts. So like, for instance, California, their most strict mandates are in the Los Angeles area, and that's the bulk of the population right there. So, but yeah, this data is taken by painstakingly researching each state, which in today's world of fake news and mandates that come and go by the hour is not exactly easy. So please forgive us if by the time this video gets uploaded, there's going to be a change. And so a similar thing going on with this slide. This is actually for the jab itself, for the shot itself. And this depicts a lot of different things. So a lot of states mandate the shot for teachers and staff, but not for kids. So this is just for kids, right? Which states are banning mandates for children? So this is really hard to depict because, again, it varies by each school district. And some school districts have it by age. So like in California, it's by age. If your kid is over a certain age, it's mandated in a specific school district like Los Angeles. Also, some states have it for the teachers. I don't depict the teachers on this slide because, for instance, New York, specifically New York City, has the strongest mandate for teachers and staff. 100%, no ifs, ands, or buts, mandated for teachers and staff, but not for kids yet. So hard to mandate. I just wanted to show this in conjunction with age of consent laws, because this is becoming rapidly a huge thing. So a lot of states have very unique age of consent laws when it comes to medical practices. For instance, Alabama, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, within Pennsylvania, specifically just Philadelphia, Rhode Island, and Tennessee, they have laws for minors under certain ages. They have usually like 14 to 16, a kid can make their decision to get a shot without their parents' consent. I should mention that South Carolina has introduced a bill to change this law, so they're going the other way. They're changing it so that kids can't consent to jack, but it's still working its way through their Congress. And then the two areas in the United States which are the worst for this is North Carolina and Washington, D.C. In North Carolina, a child as young as 12 can consent to getting a shot, and in Washington, D.C., it's 11. So these are the states to look out for if you are concerned about your child being experimented on without your consent. We're constantly seeing lots of school districts trying to pressure children, and we just have this like sneaking suspicion in the back of our minds here that some parents are gonna have their kids come home from school, with a sore arm one day, and they did not consent to anything. So just wanted to kind of highlight that for any parents out there that are concerned about this kind of stuff. And then also this factors into the medical resistance tracker that we've kind of got created. Sorry, this is kind of an ugly slide, but we're trying to map out areas of strongest resistance to like weakest resistance. So the states that are fighting back against Biden's mandates or the White House's mandates, the strongest are by far Florida. Florida has actually, the governor of Florida has actually implemented an executive order that states that private companies, will be fined by the state of Florida for complying with Biden. And they also have an executive order through the state of Florida to ban mandates and stuff like that. Same thing in Texas. Texas is not as stringent on this. The Texas Governor Greg Abbott is not as fiery on this as Ron DeSantis is. So Greg Abbott's got a lot of opposition in his state because he's got a lot of liberal presence, and he's listening to a lot of liberal people on this who want the White House's mandates to come to fruition in Texas. Also, Arkansas has actually taken direct action to ban mandates for state employees and stuff like that. A lot of states have done this, but it's kind of wishy-washy. It's really unclear as to if do they have a mandate or not. Do they have a ban on mandates or not? And it varies on the language of each state is different. So quite literally every state is different. It's really hard to track. Montana also, they banned the mandates a long time ago when they were banning passports, the medical passport type stuff. So moving down the chart, the states in yellow have expressed verbally, either on Twitter or social media or through press statements, that they will not be complying and that they will be launching lawsuits against the federal regime for these mandates. But I left they're a little bit less because they haven't taken any executive orders to do anything, and they don't have something on the books already. Moving further down the list, we've got North Dakota and Idaho, which is more of a hesitant resistance. So Idaho vetoed the banning of mask mandates a while back. So Idaho's really in a soft resistance. Same thing with North Dakota; they did the same thing. So or something similar. So North Dakota and Idaho is one of those. It could go either way. They might not fight it in court, but they might not go by it. It's really hard to say what's going to happen in those states when it comes to their state leadership, at least. And then finally, we have the states that that have expressed either verbally or taken measures to already comply with those federal mandates. And then all the other states we don't have any data for, or it's just in wait and see mode to see what people say, because these mandates just came down and we really don't know what they look like yet. It's really just like the mandates are coming, and then everybody freaked out, rightfully so. So yeah, like I mentioned, this is not a perfect chart. It's most likely going to change, probably even before this goes out. I just wanted to offer it as kind of a starting point for moving forward when tracking this kind of stuff, because we're trying to identify. It looks like, as much as we had hoped that geographic boundaries would not be a point of solidification, it looks like they might. So it looks like we might have laws in different states, as we already kind of do, that make these states so different. Like some states are closer to foreign countries than they are to each other. So it's going to be very important to keep an eye on which states are the most resistant, at least when it comes to their laws. Now, when it comes to the people in those states, that can vary a lot, and we can definitely create a separate chart for that. But for right now, we just wanted to point out the actual tactile laws / executive orders on the books that are leading the resistance forward. And then finally, moving into international issues. So the biggest one for today is the United Kingdom is facing some serious Brexit woes. For instance, they actually are going to be dumping raw or partially treated sewage into these rivers. So this graphic depicts all of the rivers that sewage is going to be dumped into, because they have a shortage of treating chemicals. So just like here in the U.S., we have a chlorine shortage. They've got a similar situation going on in the U.K. Due to the Brexit sort of trade policies that are causing shortages of pretty much everything in the country. They've got food shortages in some areas, but not in others. They've got trucking shortages pretty much nationwide, but at least in England, really not a whole lot going on on social media when it comes to stuff like this is really just somebody complaining that they didn't have a specific product on a store shelf. So it's really hard to gauge where the shortages are at. But yeah, they're going through some things over there. Also, moving to Africa, South Sudan actually has there's a cash shortage, and when I mean a cash shortage, I mean the United Nations World Food Program. They're short. Their budget is short, $154 million for South Sudan, which means that the World Food Program is not going to be sending South Sudan any food for the rest of the year. So that's not good. We're talking hundreds of millions of people have been displaced or affected by the war and the famine down there. So why do we care about this? Well, because Africa is kind of ripe for extremism right now. There's a lot of insurgent groups and terroristic groups that have taken root in Africa from the Sahel all the way down to the south of Africa. There's a lot of bad stuff going on in Africa, and it's something to keep an eye on because these groups tend to get traction there and move elsewhere. Moving on to Iran. So the Iranians, they're at it again. They have increased tensions by not allowing the International Atomic Energy Agency, their inspectors have been denied entry to a few different reactor sites for actually a few months now. And basically, Iran is overtly breaking sanctions again. They do this about like once a year or once every 2 years. They've been doing this forever. So this in conjunction with a lot of sort of mainstream media reporting, that the headline that's been going around in all the press is that Iran is producing enough uranium to be able to make an atomic weapon within 30 days. Um, yeah, I don't know about that. I think that it's a gross understatement, honestly. I think that many analysts think that Iran has had enough nuclear material to make a fissionable device for a while now. And they have the scientists to do it, courtesy of U.S. universities. So, yeah, it really depends on if Iran is willing to tempt the wrath of the West, or Israel for that matter, as to if they want to openly develop a working nuclear weapon. My guess is that they're probably going to get bombed again. Israel has bombed Iranian sites consistently for months now. So my guess is since this headline's going around in the news, the jets are already in the air. But I guess we'll find out what blows up in the next few days. Mysteriously explodes, right? Yeah, with U.S. Foreign policy being beyond hands off right now, is actually being actively harmful. It'll be a great time for Iran to make their move. And moving to China, China's got some interesting stuff that's happened over the past few, well, really months, but I'll consolidate it in just to the past couple of weeks. So they have made significant moves to change their culture. They have recently The Chinese Communist Party has recently decreed a restriction on video games. So anyone under the age of 18 can only play video games in China for 3 hours a week. Also, back in May, the CCP deleted over 2 million online posts for, quote, historical nihilism, which was basically clearing the slate and cleaning up their online presence in their run up to the CCP centennial celebrations back in July. They've also banned, quote, effeminate depictions of men in TV shows and other media. And I think perhaps most interestingly, the Chinese actress Zhao Wei has basically been erased from existence. This is one thing that the communist societies around the planet have done perfectly over the years. This is a classic Stalin tactic to erase people from existence. But this actress, she is one of the most popular actresses in all of Chinese media. She's like their main actress for films and media and stuff like that. And over the years, she's created $1 billion media conglomerate, which turned out to be her downfall, actually, because another actor, a much less known actor, one of the clients of the public relations agency that she owned, posed for a picture at a Japanese war memorial when they were on a trip to Japan. So, big deal for China, because in case you didn't know, the centuries old rivalry between Japan and China is one of the most significant and like serious in the world today. One would be hard-pressed to find two cultures that despise each other more than the Chinese and the Japanese. It's just, there's been a lot of conflict over the years going all the way back to way before World War One. So, yeah, it's kind of a long-standing rivalry there. So since this photo was not tolerated by the CCP, Wei has been deleted from existence. All of her movies and TV shows are gone. They just deleted them from, China's internet. They even deleted her name from the credits of her work. So if you're going to look up the movie she was in, like, they deleted her name from all of that. So you can't even find out what she was in. Since then, she has been spotted in France, which has kind of fueled rumors that she has fled the country. But she herself has denied this, at least on social media. But knowing the CCP's international reach, she's definitely having to lay low for a while. All of this is interesting because it further indicates that China is certainly consolidating their power of their culture. One might argue that China is looking at the weakness of Western culture and making moves to avoid what's happened here in the US, but I don't know how strong of an argument that is. Chinese leadership clearly is preparing for war, and maybe their own domestic cultural problems are enough for them to make drastic changes, independent of what the U.S. is doing. So I don't know. I thought it was kind of interesting that China is definitely making moves to seemingly avoid the problems of the West, but I don't know. Again, I don't know if those two are related. Also in the same hemisphere, North Korea recently launched a long-range cruise missile. This is a new missile. Here it is. This has a 1,500-kilometer range, which is about 930 miles. It took an hour and a half to fly that distance. So, yeah, there it is, or at least these are the photos that were released by the North Koreans, so you never really know if it's the real one or not. But it's interesting that it seems as though they are continuing with the development of their super large missile system, as they have changed the configuration to hold 5 missiles instead of the 4 missiles it was originally photographed with. So that's kind of interesting. I've also seen photos of this particular missile launcher with only 2 missile pods on it, which is kind of interesting. Missile tests for North Korea are usually a way of maintaining legitimacy in the international arena and sort of letting the world know they're still here and relevant. And pretty much everyone could have expected the North Koreans to exploit any international instability or really any weakness in the West to further compound their own projections of power, like take advantage of while the U.S. is sleeping or dealing with our own stuff. They launch a missile and suddenly they're back on everyone's radar when the U.S. is kind of down in the international community. So very interesting stuff for sure. That's pretty much all I've got for today. Thanks again for watching. Here are our sources for the day. You can also, of course, find these slides on our Odysee page. You can download the PDF of this brief if you'd like to research any of this stuff further, which we'd recommend. But yeah, thanks again for watching, and we will see you next time. And as always, fight in the shade.